Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I'm glad you guys can join me today for another episode. It is 12:22. I'm going to say Merry Christmas to each one of you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to each one of you. Merry Christmas from the Temptations. I don't know if maybe I'm just old. There used to be a classic Christmas album that they would play every year because of how damn good that Christmas album was. Like chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost nipping at your nose, Yuletide carols being sung back. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. That album will forever be a classic. The world could come to an end and that album will be a classic. That album is a piece of art, which is how good that album is. But we are speeding towards Christmas. I'm going to do a show today. I'm going to do a show tomorrow, most likely. And then I will take a vacation and not think about politics or anything else for the very least week. And I will be back by New Year. So I'm looking forward to that. I am in desperate need of that. I am running down or burning out. I've been at a just astonishing pace over the course of the last year. And you must understand, when you're working at the radio show, much of the work that you do, it's like 3 hard hours. And then there's like maybe another 45 minutes after the fact for your meeting and that type of stuff. And then there's like passive work that you need to do, like catching up on stories, figuring out what you're going to do for a monologue, that type of stuff. This is not that. This is 3 straight hours in regards to being on air, another 2 or 3 hours where you're cutting your own stuff like videos and everything else, and there's another 3 hours in the break and trying to figure out what you're going to talk about and everything. There's more time pressure here because of just because of doctor's visits and getting here. But yeah, this has been at a rapid pace. So I'm looking forward to the Christmas vacation. I'm hoping you guys are doing well. I'm hoping you guys are doing great. I am hoping that you guys will also be able to take some time with family or whatnot, or however you decide to spend your Christmas. But the news doesn't stop. So let's go into the news. We have a damn good show for you today. Mark Sleboda is going to be on at 7:15. He is one of the best in the business. I think he hates when I say it, but it's true. Mark is damn good at what he does. Dimitri Lascaris, he's going to be here at 9:15, I believe. Yeah, 9:15. And we have Jerry Gray. Jerry Gray is going to be here at 8:15. Now, all of these people have something very interesting to talk about. Mark, of course, has talked about Putin's Q&A, the negotiations that were taking place. Negotiations, as they were called, that have been taking place, which I have less and less belief in, to be all that honest. I know there are a few people who have a belief that those can bear fruit. I just don't know how. I mean, does it go through Congress? Does Trump believe he can get any kind of deal through this Congress? He can't even get Ukraine to say yes. And Ukraine is a proxy of the United States. And either he can't get them to say yes or he doesn't want them to say yes. I suppose he does want them to say yes because he wants to put more pressure on the Russians. But will the Russians show so much flexibility that they screw over the entire point of the special military operation? And to me, the answer is obviously no. In which case, can a president accept what is effectively a surrender document from the Russians? And more interestingly, how does the Russians confirm that the United States would abide by whatever agreement they sign? I don't have an answer for those things. Hence, the war continues. That's one thing. You had negotiations taking place in Florida today. Both sides come out saying, hey, everything is going great, but that's what they always say. So there's that. The United States is chasing another ship in the Caribbean. This one is an Iranian ship headed to Venezuela. And apparently the United States is trying to board that ship. The Coast Guard apparently sent out treaties for the ship to effectively stop the ship total F off, because obviously You have no legitimacy to stop us. Period. Right? You can write whatever court document that you want in your own domestic courts. So what? You have no legitimacy to stop us. Period. And so that ship has effectively, apparently the U.S. has been chasing the ship for like 9 hours or some insane thing. So there's that. There's a question about what China is going to do, because it seems that the U.S. policy at this point is to interdict ships. And this was one of the questions that I asked early on. That was a damn good question, which is why I'm glad I asked that question. Sometimes I preempt things that are taking place in the news, which kind of sucks, but it's kind of good because it means that your mind is in the right place. How does China protect the ships? Jerry Gray will be here to answer. And of course, we have Dimitri Lascaris, who's going to talk about Netanyahu coming to the U.S. pushing for a war with Iran. But I see my man is in the background. The one, the only, Mark Sleboda. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay today?
Tomorrow, I'm alive. How the hell are you? Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure.
I am okay. I am okay. I'm ready for the holidays. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the holidays. I'm going to take next week or this rest of this week off after Wednesday, so I'm looking forward to it. Mark Sleboda, by the way, international relations security analyst. You can follow all of Mark's work on Boosty. If you put in his name, Mark Sleboda, or Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, his work will appear. Again, Mark has fantastic interviews. So definitely check him out. He's damn good at what he does. Mark, I guess we have to start with, I'm not even going to start with negotiations. I'll leave that for the last 5 minutes, because that, to me, is the thing that matters less right now, because I'm very skeptical of those negotiations. I will start with Putin's Q&A, end of the year question and answer, because he was very strong in many of his answers in that Q&A, especially around things like Kaliningrad, the money that they're attempting to steal, that they failed miserably at stealing. There's that. The Kaliningrad thing caught my interest, though, because he made it very clear, like, this effectively would be war. If anything gets in the way of us in Kaliningrad, we will destroy that thing. Right here. In fact, right here. Let me see if this is in English. Okay, this is not in English, so there's no point in me playing that. But why did this question come about? Like, what is the significance of this particular question? Because obviously he's laying down a red line on this.
Okay, I think the question came about. There has been an increased tension in the Baltic to begin with for some time, right? We saw at least one attempt by the Europeans, by the European NATO, by Estonia, backed up then in the air by jets from several NATO countries. There was an attempt to seize control of a Russian oil tanker moving through the very narrow span of international waters, right, through the center of the Baltic. They attempted to command a Russian tanker. This was already a couple of months ago to
Yes.
Leave international waters, to accept being boarding, and they refused. And the entire Estonian Navy, like all three dinghies and a patrol boat, attempted to start to approach this, and then Russia jetted out some MiGs and I believe some Sus, and they very quickly retreated from that possibility. But there is increasing rhetoric within the European countries of NATO about the Baltic, about kind of the idea of intercepting Russian shipping in the Baltic. And part of that is because there is a hysteria in Europe right now and that is that Russia is conducting hybrid warfare against them. And to an extent, Russia is conducting hybrid warfare against them. And certainly the West is conducting hybrid warfare against Russia. I believe there is a degree of sabotage of European and American military industrial complex going on. There have been a number of incidences, and the same thing is true on the other side. That has also been experienced in Russia. But in particular, part of the claims of hybrid warfare is that Russia is somehow flying drones over European capitals. And they've never done anything, supposedly. And here's the problem, is that this has actually been looked into by European journalists and think tanks, and they can't actually find any evidence that Russia has been involved in any of this. And I very much doubt that they have been, right? There have been incidences of, hobbyists flying drones, of small airplanes mistaked for drones, of basically the I guess the new modern equivalent of UFO sightings was the way the report cited it. But they have, and this was compounded, all this hysteria was compounded by statements from the Kiev regime, who is, of course, playing devil's advocate here and increasing the hysteria that Russia is flying drones off of its oil tankers, right? That oil tankers flagged by Russia, or even not flagged by Russia, right? Just part of the maritime shipping industry, are flying drones, and they're approaching European capitals and flying around. I mean, that was the extent of it. I don't believe any of it is true. It's almost certainly absurd hysteria. Russia has better things to do with their drones than that. It is a needless provocation, and such as it is actually happening. And I don't believe there's actually much even happening at all. But I'm sure that the Kiev regime is behind whatever it is. And the goal, of course, is to increase the level of tension and direct conflict between NATO and Russia, and hopefully to interfere with Russia's oil industry, right? It's oil shipping. So that is all this tensions going on in the Black Sea. On top of that, and related to it, we've had statements from NATO generals that if a conflict between Russia and NATO starts, well, then they'll take Kaliningrad right off the board, right off the very beginning. They will attack it, and they will they can take it over or destroy it very quickly. That was the summation of their statements. And obviously the Russians took some umbrage at this. And I mean, the level of rhetoric is reaching incredible provocation level status. Because imagine if Russia was talking about destroying a European city or taking over a European city. The front page of every Western newspaper and magazine and TV show would be filled with it. And the Russians were incensed, but to a degree, the Russian government also played this down as, well, really absurd bluster from children. I mean, but Putin has obviously felt the need to respond to it, that if Kaliningrad is a Russian city, and the Europeans may not like that, but that was part of the result of World War II, and they're not going to get it back. And it is completely populated by Russians. And if there is perceived to be a military threat to it, well, that would be a war, and Russia would respond accordingly. Kaliningrad is very inconvenient because it is an exclave, right? It is separated from mainland Russia. right? Tucked in the corner between Lithuania and Poland. And it's actually, of course, inconvenient for Russia because they have to get supplies there by train that has to cross through enemy territory, or by ship, or by air. And that right now is all compounded in difficulty by all the tensions. That said, it is there. It's still a thriving, city. And because Russia has missile systems there, ballistic missile systems, Iskanders, as well as some of their best air defense, S-400s, possibly S-500s there. It complicates all of NATO's defense strategies because this is essentially a redoubt of air defense, very powerful, very long-range air defense, and offensive missile systems behind their lines, right, in Northern Europe there. It complicates their ability to wage a war against Russia in the area. So if there was a conflict, yes, that would be one of the early targets to break out. And Putin, because of all of this, and because of, I think ultimately primarily because of this NATO general opening his mouth and bragging about things that I don't believe that NATO has any actual capability to do. They could nuke Kaliningrad, sure. Eventually they'd get one through, but then it would be a nuclear war and they'd be completely wiped out. So I don't really understand. If they think they have some conventional way to seize control of Kaliningrad, I very much doubt that. I very much doubt that.
I'm curious.
So that's why Putin felt the need to respond.
Please finish. I'm sorry. Please finish.
Yeah, that's why Putin felt the need to respond to it, to reassure the Russian public that, if there was an actual military threat, Russia would respond to it and it would be a war.
Do you think that's where Russia's mind is currently? I mean, obviously, Ukraine, despite being a proxy, Donald Trump apparently can't get it to accept even a dead deal or a deal that would be dead. Can't push him to do it. The Europeans obviously is not for it. I don't even know if they have a real seat at the table or if they're just being placated. But this seems to be careening onward to something. And whether the Russians take all of Ukraine, whether they take a particular portion of Ukraine and say we're done, whatever that looks like, do you see the Europeans acknowledging at some point, all right, this is enough, this is just bluster? Or do you think when they're talking about 2030 that they are seriously talking about confronting Russia in like 5 years with this idea of propping up Ukraine for as long as it takes?
Okay, so first of all, I mean, as far as the idea that the Europeans do they not have a seat at the negotiation table? There is no negotiation table. Negotiations have not even begun, at least as far as Russia is concerned. All that's happened is there is another negotiation table between the Trump administration, the rest of the U.S. government, the Europeans, and the Kiev regime. And they've just been arguing amongst themselves. And Russia's somewhere off to the side, like, you guys got your ducks in a row yet? Have you got your shit together? And that's what's going on. I mean, meanwhile, this circle jerk continues. There is no peace process. There is no negotiations. It's a bunch of the West arguing amongst themselves. And it's completely, pointless because the Europeans and the Kiev regime aren't going to agree to anything. And even what the U.S. is proposing that the Kiev regime and the Europeans don't agree with, that's also not acceptable to Russia, right? They just said, yeah, okay, we can start talking with that. I mean, that's a foundation, but we don't actually agree to any of it. I mean, that is so. And that was just talking points. I mean, as far as the Russians are concerned, the 28-point peace plan that I don't know that Witkoff and Kushner, two amateurs.
Really?
I mean,
Yeah.
not real diplomats. Apparently, I don't know, scribbled together on a napkin and in an IHOP somewhere or something. I don't know. I mean, that's the level that it. I mean, it's not a peace plan, right? It's some ideas jotted down on paper, and that's the way the Russians regard it. Right. Yeah, sure. We can use that as the basis of beginning actual negotiations. And they said, of course, we will have to examine every single word by word, blah, blah, blah. Right. Part of the problem is the Russians expect a real negotiation process, right? Hearkening back to the Cold War, where teams of professional people on both sides sit down and create something resembling, as much as there is a legal document in international relations, a treaty that is argued and gone over by teams of professionals on both sides. Problem is the U.S. is just completely incapable of that anymore, right?
Yeah.
They've the decades of the unipolar moment. They're not trained up for it. They don't have those abilities. They're not even used to negotiating or doing diplomacy anymore. They just threaten countries, right, with sanctions or military action, and they expect to be obeyed.
Mhm.
And on top of that, Trump has another problem, right? He doesn't trust the State Department as part of the blob, the deep state at
Right.
all, right? Everyone within that institution is thoroughly indoctrinated, right? In, shall we say, a more traditional plan for U.S. hegemony and primacy, what we should call U.S. foreign policy orthodoxy. And Trump has his own plan, as we saw in his national security strategy, or at least the people close to him, like Elbridge Colby, for it's not giving up hegemony and U.S. primacy, but it is a retreat and retrenchment of it, and then an attempt at an idea of pushing the proxies forward in the Pacific, right?
Yes.
The Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and the Europeans against Russia over here, and the Israelis against Iran, and the U.S. consolidates its position, taking total control of the Western Hemisphere. That's his idea, and to an extent, that is, they call it burden sharing, they call it division of labor, but it's also probably pushing more onto the plates of the Europeans and
Yes.
also these proxies in the Pacific than they can actually handle. And the blob, the deep state, right? They don't agree with any of this. They don't agree with this idea of a stabilization of relations with Russia, so that the U.S. can then first concentrate on China or on Venezuela or on I don't know, Nigeria or whatever Trump has targeted this week. So he does not believe that he can work with anyone in the State Department, because they would actively seek to either just not fulfill or to sabotage anything they were thus tasked. Is his goal of somehow coming to terms with Russia and stabilizing the situation in the European area. So that's why he's gone to, and we see this again. Who's he going to for negotiations with Russia? Steve Witkoff, who is a real estate developer. I mean, he does speak Russian. I mean, that's good. But he's not a trained diplomat. He's not trained in international relations, right? I've heard him describe. Oh, he's charming. That's great. I mean, what that and I don't know, that and $7 will buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, right? Maybe I'm lowballing that number there, but anyway, I don't know how. I haven't bought a cup of Starbucks in the U.S. in 2 decades, so I might be a little behind the price there.
All right.
And Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who I don't know. I don't even know what the hell Jared Kushner is supposed to be, but And the other person they've attempted to drag in, although evidently Hegseth has tried to corral him since then, is the Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, who briefly appeared and was presented as a replacement for Keith Kellogg. His primary bona fides being he's a political loyalist to Vance and thus to Trump, right? Friends that they went to law school together and so forth. So that's their diplomatic team. It's a bunch of amateurs, right? Who the advantage of them is they're not ideologically indoctrinated and blinded like the usual blob, State Department people are. But it also means they're not capable of real professional level diplomacy. And Russia's coming to realize that, even if Trump and a small cadre of people within his administration do have a desire at some level to come to some type of terms, probably not Russian terms, but terms with Russia in Ukraine, and stabilize the situation and save as much of a proxy regime there as they can. Russians are coming to understand that the US is just diplomacy incapable at the level that they would require, that the absence of trust requires a real process. And Putin himself said about this, us demanding a real, full teams working diplomatic negotiation process. It's not that's the way that I want to do it. That's the only way it can be done between two great powers, right? That in such a situation, it's what has to be done. So I mean that is the problem with the State Department. With regards to Europe and NATO, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that the Kremlin started out this thinking they could launch the special military operation, force the Kiev regime and NATO to come to terms, right? Probably with the Donbass and some agreement not to extend Ukraine into NATO, and then there would be some kind of return to normal relations, right? Business as usual with Europe. Okay, if that was their plan, and I believe it was, they've been severely abused of that delusion since then. There will not be an end to this conflict that will see any restoration of peace, of stability, of business as usual with Europe. Okay, Europe has worked itself into a Russian hating frenzy. I mean, it's hard to find a historical parallel. I mean, even the Germans, if we want to talk World War II, I'm not so sure that it reached that level of shrillness. So I mean, Russia's just caricatured as the evil in every way, and they refuse to even do diplomacy with Russia. They won't speak to him, not on the phone, not with one low-level person to another, nothing. So and they're very angry that the US is breaking their code on Russia and doing that. And it's compounded by the fact that they have literally committed economic suicide in the pursuit of this geopolitical conflict with Russia, by the blowback from their own sanctions, which has hurt them far more than it has Russia. But they cannot accept losing to Russia in Ukraine. Cannot accept it. They will not accept it. As far as they're concerned, the events of 2014, the Westback Maidan Putsch, geopolitically flipped Ukraine, and they had it for almost a decade since then, more or less under their control. And they feel it's like a dog urinating on its territory, right? They refuse to give it up. They refuse to acknowledge the reality. And ultimately, because they're suffused with this supremacist messianic ideology of exceptionalism, Western exceptionalism, where they believe they truly believe that they are structurally, societally, and above all, morally superior not just to Russia, but to every other country in the world. And therefore, anything they do in the foreign policy and security realm is justified because they're the good guys. They wear the white hats, and the other side are the inferior bad guys.
Right.
And to admit losing to Russia in Ukraine would be a fundamental challenge to their worldview, to their very identity, for their belief in the way the world works and their place in it. So it's completely, and it's not just a handful of leaders. It's pretty much the entirety or the vast majority of the European political and military ruling elite. So there's no hope even that in most cases, right? So we've got Hungary and Slovakia, and now a Ukraine skeptic prime minister in Czechia, right? But you really can't see this happen structurally in Germany, in France. Their politics are too managed to allow such a heretical position on foreign policy to come forward. And in countries like Romania, where it had a possibility of, we saw that they just annulled democracy in the country to, you can't vote for this guy. You're not allowed to, right? It's just banned because that position is unacceptable. So what we've heard repeatedly from from the vast majority of European political leaders, military leaders, intelligence leaders, there is a war with Russia coming, a direct war with Russia coming. Maybe it's in 2 years, maybe it's in 3 years, maybe it's in 5 years, maybe it's 2030, right? But it's coming. And the European people need to prepare for it. They need to pump money into their military industrial complex. We heard from both French and British generals in the past 2 weeks that the French and British people need to sacrifice their own sons and daughters to fight Russia, right? That's the mental space that they're in. And we've just, Google war with Russia, and you will get dozens and dozens of statements, right, by pretty much every leader, right, across. And they're trying to use it to continue aid to Ukraine, to pump more money away from social affairs, from welfare, societies into warfare societies in Europe. And they're trying to return the draft to large numbers of European countries, right? Because they can't get enough of their citizens willing to join their militaries, especially when they're talking about going to war with Russia. Right. So Russia is paying attention to all of this, right? They can't ignore it. And there was a far more important than the Q&A, in my mind, is Putin spoke extensively at a meeting of the Russian military collegium over a few days before the Q&A last week. And there was a lot said about the SMO, but also just about the general military and geopolitical position behind it. We heard from the Secretary of Defense, the Russian Minister of Defense, Belousov. We heard from the Russian Chief of the General Staff, Valery Gerasimov. We heard from Putin. Putin spoke twice, actually, there. And essentially they've resigned themselves to the fact that they're going to be at war with Europe, that yet Europe is going to go to war with them. And I believe that Europe is probably not going to directly attack Russia. And Russia certainly has no plans to attack Europe. What is going to happen is they're going to send troops into Ukraine, right? Or possibly Moldova. It could expand horizontally. The Ukraine conflict could expand horizontally out like that. But, into the gray area between the two countries, such as it still exists. And that, of course, would lead to direct war, and Russia has made that perfectly clear that that is unacceptable. So that's the way it will almost certainly start. They want the Kiev regime to hang on for another 2 or 3 or however many years until several things happen. One, until they believe or they hope, and I have some sincere doubts about this, that they will have been able to resuscitate their military industrial complex. And when I say that, I should say their military industrial complexes, because they don't have one military industrial complex in Europe. They have 12 or 13 little scattered, fractured, individual pork-eating military industrial complexes that are just not capable of the task, right? Mostly because not only, but in part at least because they're not unified, right? They're not all buying the same weapon systems, right? It really limits what they're capable of at scale and interoperability amongst their military forces. The other thing, of course, that they're hoping for, and to mobilize their people, right, for war, conscription, draft, however you want to call it. So that's one part. The other thing is they expect Donald Trump to be gone. The next leader of the U.S., right, whom will be more traditional U.S. hegemonic master, right, whether that's Marco Rubio on the Republican side or pretty much any Democrat, right, they expect the Trump aberration to be gone. Of course, they're hoping that J.D. Vance doesn't succeed Trump. That would be very problematic to this whole thing. But, they've got a few years, and, whatever Trump may say, the U.S. economy is not looking really good, and there are, social issues, and it's not at all inevitable that J.D. Vance will follow Trump, as the next president. That is not guaranteed in the slightest. So that is, absolutely something they're not hoping on. But yes, this is not a bluff. Right? Whether they're capable of what they themselves believe they plan to do, right? That's another story. But I believe that they believe they're going to war against Russia in a few years. And Russia sees that, they hear that, and we heard at that collegium that Russia is going to do what they have to do to prepare for that eventuality and to win that conflict too.
It does seem, though, that financially this is a bit ludicrous. I mean, they just tried to steal the Russian money. They weren't able to do it. You've had like the IMF, Euroclear, the World Bank,
European Central Bank. Yeah, everyone was against it. Yeah.
And so they ended up giving
not because they're pro-Russian, simply because it would have meant suicide for Euroclear, for the euro as a reserve economy, and thus the economy of Europe as a whole to do so. Yes.
Who's supposed to pay back this $90 billion that they are loaning? Or
Russia, of course. Russia is supposed to pay it back, because Russia's going to pay reparations to Ukraine, and then Ukraine can pay the loan. I mean, that's still the spin that von der Leyen and the European Commission and Merz tried to put on their failure to seize Russian assets as collateral for a reparations loan, right? That was the financial chicanery they were going to use, right, for that, to have, I don't want to say a fig leaf of legal justification, because everyone knew it wasn't legal, right? An illusion of legal justification. That was what they were going to do, and they failed to do it. But they're still now informally trying loan with the idea of Russia paying reparations, which is something that is never going to happen. I mean, because, well, first of all, because Russia's winning, right? They're not losing, right? And of course, so they're never going to pay reparations. We can talk about the Ukraine paying reparations to Russia at the end of this. If we're going to go further, we can talk about the Europeans paying reparations to Russia I like that idea myself. But Russia paying reparations to them, that's a fantasy world. That is a delusional fantasy world that, along with their exceptionalism, this is just one more byproduct of that they live in. But that's what they're still trying to link it. Before it was direct, right? This is a collateral. Russia's money is seized as collateral for a reparations loan. Now they're just trying to say that this loan, and there's actually not clear where they're actually going to get this money from. They intend to borrow money, possibly from the international bond market, right, as a European bond, backed on the joint European budget, some future European budget, which, by the way, they've already drawn money on to try to recover from the COVID crisis in 21 and all the spending they did there as well. So that's not clear that international financial investors are gonna really buy into this, and if they do, it can be an absolutely ridiculous interest rate that they would demand as a process. And when they're talking 90 billion euros for the Kiev regime, right, that's supposed to last the regime over 2 years, right? So first of all, the Kiev regime has at least a $50 billion budget hole. 50 billion euros, higher than 50 billion, the 50 billion euro budget hole that they need just to keep afloat. And we're not even talking military aid, right? That's just financial, because they have no economy at this point. Now, that 90 billion euros is supposed to last over 2 years. Everyone knows that's not enough. But on top of that, they don't even get all 90 billion, because a considerable portion of that, maybe up to 40 billion, is actually intended to pay back the interest on previous loans that the Europeans have given to the Kiev regime. So they're playing this, taking out loans to pay back the interest on loans that they've already. This is the financial house of cards that they're on, right? And they're all desperately trying not to decrease social spending as much as possible because of the political damage that would result in their countries. They're all doing it, right? But they're not anywhere near belt tightening enough even to stay afloat, much less for vastly increased military spending and more money for Ukraine and so forth. So on top of the fractured military industrial complex and the problem they've already had, the other problem, as you rightly point out, is, can they afford this? And the Spectator answered that question at the end of last week in an article. Can Europe afford a war with Russia? That was a headline. And the first thing they said was, no, we can't afford a war with Russia. However much we would like to, we can't. And I think that's largely true. The Europeans are going to come out of this whole thing in such a bad economic and political position, at the end of this. And it's all mostly self-inflicted. They still try to deny this, right? That the economic woes that they're suffering result in large part due to increased energy costs, because they're refusing the relatively cheap, reliable energy they were getting from Russia. And it's made all of their economics uncompetitive, led to the deindustrialization of Germany, and thus the sinking of the rest of the European economy. And they're just in a very bad economic position coming out of all of this, on top of, the political crisis that will inevitably result, because they're going to fail, they're going to lose. And so much political capital has been invested from all of the center-right, center-left ruling parties of Europe as well as every major figure in the European Commission and elsewhere. We hear everyone pretty much acknowledging in the Western media a reality that the Trump administration, for I'm not one to give them credit for much of anything, but they rightly identified that we're out of the unipolar moment, probably in a transitional world phase here now. Do we go to a multipolar world? Do we go to a bipolar world? Right, a transitional phase. But right now there are three great powers. The U.S. still being a superpower, right? But a fading one, a fading hegemon in relative terms. China is rising and is the other superpower. And in some respects, they are above the U.S. already, and certainly will be in other categories, right, in the very near future. And one that the U.S. sees as their real rival. But the new U.S. national security strategy attempts to redefine their confrontation with China in more economics and push the proxies forward terms. Meanwhile, Russia is a great power, not in some respects, right? It's a nuclear superpower, right? But simply in population terms, Russia has less than half the population of the United States, which has less than half the population of China. And that's a reality. You can't escape that. Yeah, on paper, on a map anyway, Russia's enormous amount of resources, but their population is relatively small compared to the other great powers. And ultimately, that's important. And Russia has outside strategic and conventional forces relative to their population, especially now with the grown strength and capability of their military forces. But in many ways, then, in a three great power status where Russia is, in relative terms, the weakest of the three, Russia plays the kingmaker. Russia decides who wins the future. And Russia is firmly aligned, allied with China. And there is no hope that the U.S. can find the light of day between them, no matter what a handful of people in the Trump administration may think. And the majority of people in the U.S. blob, the deep state, they don't even think that, right? They actually believe it is morally incorrect to try traditional realist balance of power, divide and conquer. As far as they're concerned, they're the good guys. Russia and China are the bad guys. So even attempting to divide Russia and China by making some compromises with Russia, which isn't going to happen at this point anyway, because Russia's not the Putin, at least, isn't that stupid. The whole Kremlin isn't that stupid. But they believe that would be morally unacceptable. That was the very firmly held belief of the Blinken-Sullivan administration, that they could and must engage, in conflictual terms with Russia and China and Iran and whoever else, all at the same time. And we see where that led them.
Yeah. One of the other things Putin pointed out that one more question on this point. The amount of money that the United States is apparently providing to Ukraine this year is going to drop to, I think, $800 million, which is a rounding error. It's nothing.
Okay, but it's probably a lot more than that. But anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the public money that is earmarked by Congress.
Oh, yes. You're saying basically there's other monies that are effectively going to be shuffled to Ukraine for various reasons under more mysterious means. Yeah. But I think we can go with the idea, though, that the amount of money that Ukraine is getting is depreciating, either from Europe and from the United States.
Yes.
From your point of view, what does this mean? Does this mean that this war is careening to some recognition by the Europeans and the United States that,
No,
all right, this is this is done, because
no,
otherwise,
no.
when they
It's
continue
not
the same
it's
way,
not a reflection of a decision change. It is reflected of an inability to maintain financially or military, right? It's not a choice they're
I see.
making. They're simply
It's a
not
reality that
capable.
they're stuck with.
It's a reality, right? It's a reality that they still largely, right? You can say that, okay, Trump and a couple of people near him acknowledge it, but the rest of the actual U.S. government does not, right? The rest of the U.S. regime, the blob, right? The State Department, the intelligence services, the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, the think tanks, everything. They don't. The media, they don't accept that, right? So they still live in a delusional world of a couple decades ago of the unipolar moment, and they're unwilling to wake from that delusion.
One of the other things that Putin pointed out in his speech was that there are going to be other big losses from the standpoint of Ukraine going into the end of the year, or big wins from the standpoint of Russia going into the end of the year. What are we looking at with this? Like, what do you think he's ultimately talking about when he's saying this? Because he was pretty definitive. I mean, he was a peacock.
It was actually very specific. He talked about Liman, where Russia has over 50% of Liman at this point. Russians call it Krasny Liman, right? In the northern Donetsk area. Konstantinovka, in the south central Donbass, right? The tail end of the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka, the last defensive line. Russia already has over 50% of Konstantinovka, right? I mean, not only around the city, not only, the flanking, the cutting of supply lines, but actually 50% of over 50% of the buildings. There is active urban fighting it's just not being discussed in the media much. And to an extent, I mean, there's not a lot of information coming out from either side about the fights going on there. Pokrovsk kind of store the headlines. Kupiansk has that, where the Kiev regime is attempting a counteroffensive, a very intensive counteroffensive there now that they've stripped every other front to conduct, right, to try to regain control of Kupiansk while denying that they ever lost control of it at the same time. There's that. The other one is in the eastern Zaporozhye region, and that's Gulai Polya, which is a small city, but a big, important logistical and strategical position, where, again, Russia has over 50% of Gulai Polya already taken at this point. So that's the three big, in settlement terms. Of course, there's one or two or three settlements a day across the contact line, but these are, of much smaller and, shall we say, strategic value. But those I think are the three big ones that he specifically by name mentioned.
And you don't think losing these territories create any political chaos in Kiev and trying to? I mean, it's obvious that the speed of the Russian advance is increasing.
They still don't even acknowledge that they lost Pokrovsk. I mean, they still do not publicly admit that, right? And that's already a month in the rearview mirror. And Mirnograd will be done in days, right? The cauldron, if it's not already completely cleared, right, with all of the Kiev regime troops there, either eliminated or surrendered, that Mirnograd pocket will be closed this week as well. So
that's what.
Will they be politically destabilized? Yeah, I mean, to a degree, but they've already, in some degree, have all of these losses kind of baked into their mentality, right? For them, the greater political instability is the continued cold shoulder on support from the United States that they're getting, and the inability of the Europeans, right? Because ultimately, whether they can continue this war for a year or more than that depends on the amount of financial and military aid they get from the West, primarily Europe at this point, but potentially from the US, all things depending as well. But that is more important for them in regime stability, I think, than say losing Gulai Polya.
I see. One of the things that came out in negotiations, or at the very least reporting, was that they were talking about security guarantees. And I keep thinking to myself, what security guarantees is Russia going to accept?
Security guarantees, translate that. What does that mean? Rather than Ukraine and NATO, it means NATO and Ukraine, right? Which is completely unacceptable. That's what security guarantees means, right? Just translate it, NATO in Ukraine, which is completely unacceptable to Russia. They went to war to prevent that. So
yeah, that's a non-starter.
Europeans know this, right? Every time they mention security guarantees, they know that they're literally throwing a wrench into any idea of any peace process.
Negotiations. One more point. The general that was assassinated. This came out, I believe, I saw it this morning for the first time. Yeah. And there was apparently another car bomb that injured the driver and murdered the general.
Yeah.
What do we know about this? I mean, this just
so as far as I can tell,
intelligence.
This general was completely unrelated. As far as I can tell, this general was completely unrelated to the conflict in Ukraine. They just killed him because he's a Russian general, and they identified a weakness where they could reach him, right? A security weakness. He was involved in the training of command staff, right? That's what he was involved in right now, at least. And again, he has nothing to do directly with the conflict in Ukraine. They just identified someone they thought they could take out, and they did, as part of the dirty war. And this is part of the assassinations, Operation Spiderweb, attacking oil tankers, right? As they lose and they get more desperate on the battlefield, you will see more and more resort to the dirty war. And we will see no end of it. Well, we will see no end of it. I mean, I would say at least until the regime is removed from Kiev, but probably after that as well, right? Because then the Europeans will just host a guerrilla war against Russia out of Poland or wherever else, right? So they were preparing for that before the conflict even started. So, there will be no end to the dirty war. None.
One last question before I close. The interdicting of ships. So the U.S., of course, in expanding around Venezuela with the largest armada in the history of South America, as Donald Trump called it. That's not just against Venezuela. I mean, this goes back to the whole Monroe Doctrine thing. Initially, Monroe Doctrine was preventing Europeans from engaging with South American countries. Well, now it's China, Russia, Iran. And so these are going to be, this is also against these countries. Yes. It's not just against Venezuela.
It is a very geopolitical. I believe at some level, at one level, it is simply, you're trying to take my knight in Ukraine away from me. I'm going to take your rook in Venezuela away from you. That's to some extent that I believe that's what is part of the thinking.
But the interdicting of ships, that would be beyond the pale, or would it be beyond the pale? Is this something Russia's just going to kind of accept?
It's more a question of what can they do in response. Do they accept it? No. What can they do about it? It's in the Western Hemisphere, right? Russia and China do not have the power projection capability to really challenge this, right? Unless they're willing to go to nuclear war with Russia, the United States, which they're not willing to do over Venezuela, right? Now, the U.S. is exposing itself, despite its rhetoric. For years, the U.S. has paraded its navies up and down the coast of China and Russia and Iran, claiming they're there as part of freedom of navigation exercises to ensure maritime commerce, even though there was no actual threat to freedom of navigation or maritime commerce. Now we see openly that it is the U.S., its European allies, and its Kiev proxies that are the greatest threat to freedom of navigation and maritime commerce in the world. And I mean, there's going to be all sorts of complications. One of it is insurance costs for shipping for everyone are going through the roof. It is, I mean, it has the potential for major confrontation. Primarily, there's a big difference on whether a ship that is interdicted is a ship flagged in Oman carrying goods from, say oil or from Venezuela to China, or something from China to Venezuela, or whether it's a Chinese flagged ship. There's a world of difference between those two things. If it's some third world, some flag of convenience tanker, it's something that ultimately is complained about and then swept under the table because it's part of global maritime shipping. But if it's one of their own flagged ships, then that technically is an act of war. Now, whether it's responded to as an act of war is another thing. And my understanding is that Russia, which, the whole idea of the shadow fleet, which was the majority of it, was just global maritime shipping, right? Companies, captains who had a ship and saw money to be made by taking oil from Russia to China or somewhere. But increasingly, particularly in the Baltic area, Russia is moving towards its own flagged ships to use, right? So, the actual Russian-owned fleet. And if they then, there was an incident already this weekend where a Russian tanker, a Russian cargo ship, the Adler, was stopped by Sweden. Now, there's a bit of a complication here. Evidently, they had some type of malfunction that the ship engine trouble, the ship stalled. And so that's Russia's not making a big deal out of that particular situation at the moment. But they did board it, and they were looking for drones, of course, of which none were there and everything. That in any other situation where they attempt to board a Russian flagged ship, that we've already seen that Russia scrambles jets, they scramble MiGs, right? That is it demands a defense of statehood, and the same thing with China. Very quietly, a Russian ship has run through the Caribbean and docked in Venezuela, the Hyperion, right? Now, of course, they'll have to leave again, but the Trump administration did not try to seize a Russian tanker because it is a flagged Russian tanker. That's the world of difference when we're looking at these ships, right? Yes, they're carrying goods to and from China. Yeah, that's a bad thing, and the Chinese will be very upset about it. But ultimately, that's the rules of the game, right? Yes, the U.S. is bending the rules of the game, but if it's then done to a flagged ship, of a country that matters, Russia, China, so forth, then that's fighting words, right? Then we have a problem. So this is a huge problem for maritime shipping and a huge potential for escalation right now. The U.S. has done this a little bit here, a little bit there for the last couple of decades. But this is a new qualitative and quantitative escalation of this. The U.S. is literally declaring an economic blockade of Venezuela. The last time we saw the U.S. try to blockade a leftist country in South and Central America was Cuba in the 1960s, and that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Yeah, there's a lot of potential for escalation here, and again, it depends on particulars. Basically, Russia and China know that if the U.S. really wants a regime change in Venezuela, they will get it. Governance of Venezuela after that's another question entirely. And their position is, if the U.S. wants to walk into another Vietnam, then who are we to stop them?
Mark Sleboda, always appreciate you, man. Thank you for this. Mark Sleboda, he's an international relations security analyst. You can find all of Mark's work on boosty.com, Boosty. If you put in Real Politics with Mark Sleboda or just Mark Sleboda, his information will come out. Definitely check him out. Definitely subscribe to his channel. Mark, thank you for this, man. You have a good rest of your day. Be safe.
You as well. And happy holidays to you, Jamal.
Merry Christmas. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Have a good one.
January.
I know.
Our Christmas is in January. Yeah.
Happy American Merry Christmas. I'll say that.
I celebrate the solstice, and that was yesterday. So.
Happy belated solstice. I'll say it that way. You have a good one, man. Be safe. Thank you for this.
Sure.
Bye-bye. All right. I see my guest in the background. We're going to go from one damn good guest to another one. We are joined with the man himself, Jerry Gray. How you doing, Jerry? You doing okay today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And we also celebrated winter solstice yesterday here in China.
Did you? Well, yeah, happy belated winter solstice.
Thank you. It's a very important date here. It's like Midwinter's Day, and it's a thing when the families get together and we eat special types of food for this day. It's quite an important event. So yeah, I had dinner with my wife's family yesterday, and I cycled out there, 20 kilometers out there, and I cycled home this morning. Really feeling fit today.
That was a cold trip, I'd imagine. It's cold.
No, it's 22 degrees centigrade here.
Is it?
It's beautiful weather. Yeah, in fact, a little hot at the moment.
Yeah, for some reason I thought it was colder than that.
Well, it is winter. It is winter, and it should be cooler. Where I live is way down in the south, not far from Macau, and we tend to get very mild winters. It very rarely touches, like once in history, touched freezing, and it snowed once. And it was just such a light snow that people were building snowmen this big on the tops of cars. You know, they're collecting the snow and making tiny little snowmen. So it doesn't get very cold here. At the time that happened, I was in Beijing, and it was like 4 foot of snow and minus 16. But yeah, I was getting messages from my friends here saying, "Look, I built a snowman." So yeah, it's not cold here. It's particularly warm this year, but it doesn't get very cold anytime.
Now, I love Christmas and Thanksgiving. Those are my two favorite holidays. It's and I guess winter solstice is similar in the way it's celebrated in the States. Like Christmas is celebrated in the States. Like food.
It's not so much that. Christmas is just another day for most people here. It's in the same way that you probably don't celebrate Chinese New Year. Here, they just don't. And when I first came here, I thought this was very strange. And then someone said to me, "Well, what do you do at Chinese New Year?" I said, "Nothing." Bang! The light comes on in the head. Oh, yeah, that makes sense now. And it does. We don't do anything for Chinese New Year in the West. I mean, I know there's sometimes Chinatown will put on something, but that's Chinese people celebrating it. And because of multiculturalism, people get involved in that. But here we have Christmas celebrations in the supermarkets, in the shopping centers. You can hear jingle bells from the 1st of December all the way to the end of February. And I mean, it really is quite annoying after a while. But the fact is, it's not mentioned in schools. And this is where they say, Xi Jinping has banned Christmas. No, he hasn't. What he said is, no religion in, not he, the law says no religion in schools. And it's been saying this since long before Xi Jinping came along. And what's happened is slowly but surely, Christian missionaries, first of all, and then people like me coming over here, teachers, and we introduce our culture into the schools. And over the years, it's got more and more relaxed. And then about 10 years ago, someone said, let's get this out of schools. Religion is not for schools. So they don't have Eid, they don't have Christmas, they don't have any religious festival in the schools. But the shopping centers are full of Christmas decorations and Christmas trees. You
that's money making enterprise at that point. No, I don't celebrate it for religious reasons. I just like the feel it, if that makes sense. Like, I know it's not real ultimately. It's just it's a reason for people to get together and people to eat a huge amount of food, which
That's right.
I
I'm not
accept.
religious at all. I mean, I gave up on organized religion, much to my parents' disgust, when I was about 13 or 14. I rebelled, and it was a big problem in my family. And I haven't celebrated Christmas as the birth of Christ, but I celebrate Christmas as exactly what you just said: a time to get together, a time to be friends with people, make up for
Yes.
old arguments, and try and correct them, and just moving on. It's a great time, and we got 16 people, I think, coming for Christmas dinner.
Very cool.
And
Very
we only
cool.
live in a
Very
small
cool.
apartment too, so it's going to be very warm in the house.
Oh, that's very cool. Now, I am going to be in Baku spending it alone this year. Um,
Oh, sorry to
but
hear
I will
that,
be
but
taking
Baku
time
sounds
off. No,
nice.
no, it's okay. I chose. I'm the one who decided to go gallivanting around the globe in order to save money. So that's on me. What I brought you on for, that I have a deep interest in, I'm fascinated by, to be bluntly honest with you. Donald Trump has decided to put a armada, the largest armada in the history of South America, around Venezuela, effectively saying it's a full military or naval blockade of Venezuela. Okay, you can do that, but obviously Venezuela is a sovereign country. Your reasons for doing it are nonsense, which means you're just making it up as you go along. This is just gangster politics. And as a sovereign country, Venezuela has relationships with other sovereign countries. And so military blockade against Venezuela is not just against Venezuela, it's also against any country that trades with Venezuela. So
Yeah.
any boat coming from Russia, Iran, China, add in any other random country, will be apparently interdicted by the US military. And from my understanding, one of the tankers that the US stole was rerouted to Texas, where they can effectively steal the oil from that tanker. Now, they are chasing another ship coming from, I believe, Iran, and they've been chasing that for apparently, what, like 9 hours or something like that. It's an insane amount
Wow.
of time.
Yeah.
But they've already interdicted a Chinese ship. I think one, it may be two, but I know at least one. What is China going to do about this? I mean, obviously, they have a relationship with Venezuela. They have not been militaristic, but they've maintained their trading, let's say, relationship with Venezuela.
Yeah.
What are they going to do with this? I mean, is it China is going to just accept that the US has the balance of power in this region? Or are they going to take some other kind of action in order to compensate for what the United States is effectively doing, which is an act of war?
It's a fairly good question, and it's well posed as well, because the issue we need to understand is who owns the ship, and it's not China. Now, China may have built the ship, but it's flagged from Panama or somewhere else. They're usually flagged from a different country. So I heard Mark talking about that while I was waiting to come on the show, and he's absolutely right, because there's a really big difference between what will happen with a Chinese or a Russian flagged ship, and what will be the difference between that and a Panamanian or Cayman Islands or wherever it happens to be flagged from. Now, the other issue is, who does the cargo belong to? Now, once the cargo has been paid for, it belongs to the customer. Now, that customer may very well be a Chinese state-owned enterprise, or it could be a Chinese private corporation. So it's not a Chinese ship in the sense that it's not registered in China. It may very well be crewed by Chinese people, but even that's probably unlikely too. Most of these ships are crewed by all kinds of individuals, and the skipper is from Sweden, Denmark, UK, wherever the skipper happens to be from. So you've really got this multinational view of what's going on here, and it's not China's stance to say, stop doing that. So if this was a state-owned ship, a state-flagged ship, and a state-owned enterprise owns the cargo on it, then you've got an act, not necessarily an act of war, but certainly an act of piracy against China. Now, we need to go back a little bit. Let's just take a couple of backward steps and say to ourselves, what gives America the right to do this? And the only thing that gives America the right to do this is the American president. He's written an executive order which says that Venezuela is an enemy of their state and the property of Venezuela belongs to the American state. And so China has every right in the world under all international legal systems, the World Trade Organization, in the United Nations, all of the different places where you can go to, the United Nations Law of the Sea, the United National Criminal Court, the Court of Justice, all of these places, China has every right to deal with and work with the Venezuelans, because there is no United Nations ban on dealing with them. So like North Korea has a United Nations ban, Cuba has a United Nations ban. So all of these countries, the 190 plus countries in the world, have every right to deal with Venezuela, but America has the power to stop them. There are probably really only 2 countries in the world that America does not have the power to stop, and that is Russia and China. Now, Iran is quite a belligerent country, and honestly, I support Iran in their belligerence because of what's happening to them. And I mean, I don't necessarily know what's going on the ground in Iran, but that's got nothing at all to do with America or American politicians or the American public. That's for the Iranians to sort out on their own ground, in their own sovereignty. What's happening in Venezuela is between Venezuelan people and their government, nothing at all to do with America. So why America have taken this stance is really interesting to me, and it seems like the only reason they've taken it is because they actually want a war. And what Mark said towards the end there, when America wants regime change, they usually get regime change. They don't always, but they usually do. And when they do, what's going to happen? That's when the lawlessness comes in. That's when your Iraqs, your Libyas, your Syrias, even your Afghanistan for 20 years. What happens there? Massive amounts of lawlessness, murders, drugs, and stuff like that, all happening inside of that country, inside of that sovereign nation. And then abject poverty for the people who live there. Going to war with Venezuela is not going to relieve their poverty. Getting out of Venezuela and letting Venezuela trade with the rest of the world, the same as Cuba and North Korea, will alleviate their poverty. That's how you alleviate poverty, not by sanctioning them and embargoing them and then saying, look at this failed state, this proves that they can't manage. Well, they can manage perfectly well if they're left alone to deal with the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world has decisions to make. Do we want to deal with that regime, that government, whatever you want to call it? America can make its own decisions, but it does not have the power to make unilateral decisions and then impose those decisions on the rest of the world. What it has is the strength to do that, but not the authority. So what America is doing is illegal, except in America. They can do whatever they want in America. They have a Senate, they have Congress, they have a president, they have a justice system, they have everything they need to do for America. But when did they start making laws for Venezuela or Cuba or Democratic People's Republic or China or Iran or Russia? They don't. They don't have that right. So it's not an act of war when they start bombing these people in the sea. This is an act of terrorism. This is an act of piracy when they take one of these ships. So many people are talking about war crimes, and they're going to get done for war crimes. They're not. In order for you to have a war crime, you need to have a war. And they don't have one. So these are not war criminals. They're criminals. That's it. Let's cut off the war part of it, because there is no war with Venezuela. There is no war with Colombian fishermen, but they're bombing them out of the water. This is illegal, and there is nothing in the world that people seem to be able to do about it, because the United Nations is completely powerless to stop this. Now, I don't know how to change this. I really don't. But the fact is, this is what the United Nations was set up for, and it's failing miserably. China knows this. China wrote a white paper about 2 years ago saying the United Nations doesn't need to change. Its charter doesn't need to change. But there are a few countries that need to be brought into line to work within the charter and the rules of the United Nations. And if they're not going to do that, then the United Nations is a failed organization. So there's your problem. What will China do about it was another part of your question. The simple answer is I don't know. I've been on the State Council Information Office, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a couple of other websites today to have a look and see if there's any comments about this. No comments at all. So what I suspect is likely to happen is it won't happen for a period of time. And when it does happen, it'll be something like they did with the rare earth element restrictions. It'll be something America wasn't expecting at a time that they're not expecting it, and it's going to hurt them in the same way that the rare earth elements did hurt them. And it's still hurting them, and it's going to hurt them much more if they go to war without a supply of rare earth elements to replenish. So
basically,
that's the problem.
Basically, don't engage directly.
No,
but
I think that's China's policy. What Mark said is right. China has built a defensive military. It's extremely defensive. Now, it's big, it's huge, but it's designed to protect China. It's not designed to project power out. It's designed to prevent projected power coming in, and it's designed to keep China intact and protected and safe. So their military is here. There is no massive military expansion by China around the world. They've got one only military base, and they work with America off the Horn of Africa in Djibouti. That's the only external military base. Now then people say, but what about a base in Cuba? Well, there isn't one. What they have in Cuba is some kind of radio listening station, but it's not a military base. They have a similar thing in the Indian Ocean. It's not a military base. Then they say, what about the South China Sea? Well, there is no military bases in the South China Sea apart from Hainan Island, which is undisputably part of China. It's a province of China in the same way Taiwan is, which is differently managed. But Hainan is actually a province of China that I don't need a passport to go to. I need a passport to go to Hong Kong, but I don't need one to go to Hainan Island. So simply put, you can argue all you like about China's expansion, but you're arguing from a position of ignorance. If you think China's military has expanded, China's military has grown, but it hasn't expanded outside of China. And that is what China does. It doesn't have the power to project. It currently has 3 aircraft carriers, and it's got a 4th on the way and a 5th on the way after that. So it's going to have that power projection, but I don't think it will ever need to use them. It doesn't plan to use them in America, in Latin America, or throughout the rest of Asia. It plans to use them around China to prevent exactly what's happening now to Venezuela ever happening to China.
To China itself. This puts me in the mind of choke points. The policy document that went into this idea of choking China's out, or choking China out, choking their capability of trade with the rest of the world, with the idea of trying to stem China's, let's say, economic expansion or economic dominance, which industrial and economic might. It seems like that's what this is, even though it may be unstated in the sense of the way Trump is doing this. This does put you in the mind of that particular strategy of interdicting ships and interdicting shipments. Or am I getting this wrong? This is not exactly the same thing.
I don't think you're getting it wrong. I think it's all part of a broader strategy. Many people, and right at the moment, there is some conflict in the China watcher sphere where some people feel that America is pivoting towards its own hemisphere, and some people feel that's total bull dust. It's not happening. Now, I'm of the latter. I think it's total bull dust. I think what they are doing is they're outsourcing, subcontracting, if you like, a lot of the things. So they're saying to Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, and Australia, to a much greater extent Australia, they're saying, you need to pay to protect yourselves. We're not going to do it for you. Now, I get that. America doesn't want to keep paying for it. But then why does America feel the need to have that level of protection for those? It's not America's issue at all. America's made it its own issue. It's created the Taiwan Act. It's created the forced posture agreement in Australia. It's created agreements with the Philippines and Japan, and now they're talking about providing nuclear weapons, nuclear support to Japan. If that ever happens, China will be very upset about that. And quite rightly, they will then invoke the United Nations, which allows them to take a preemptive strike. Now, they will never, ever preemptively strike Japan unless Japan has nuclear weapons and uses one of them against China. That's written into China's law. They will never preemptively strike a non-nuclear force. So if Japan never gets nuclear weapons, China will never strike it with a nuclear weapon. But they will strike it if they need to. And they can, under the Charter of the United Nations, China can strike Japan if it feels Japan is a threat. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, or they should, or maybe they even could. I'm saying they can if they chose to. But I think China is much better at adapting this kind of, the best battle is the one you don't ever fight. And that is what they're more likely to do. They're more likely to diplomatically work this away and then economically work their stresses out. So if there's a stress between America and China, China has the ability, literally, to close down America's economy tomorrow if it chose to. It's never chosen to. It currently owns $800 billion in American debt. If it just dumped that on the market, what would happen to American dollars? They'd be useless to anyone. They'd be toilet paper. They're not going to do that because it hurts them just as much. They also have 87% of all of the USA's medicines coming out of China. So 87% of all of US medicines are either directly shipped from China or their precursors go from China to a third country, often India, and then are shipped. They could stop that tomorrow if they chose to. So it's as simple as that. America could really be destroyed by China like that if they chose to. This is not the way China has ever worked. So all these fear-mongerings that you hear about China and what they could do are basically projections of what America has done, is doing, or is planning to do. So China's not doing any of the things that they say they could do. They're just simply sitting back and working out what they need to do. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Fernando Munoz Bernal, a good friend of mine, who's also online a lot, made a great comment to me. He said what they should do in China is they should put everything into a box, and the box says made in Xinjiang, and ship it off to America. Because they've literally sanctioned Xinjiang for no reason. They've made up human rights issues, and I know this for a fact. I've been to Xinjiang many times, 3 times this year alone. I've cycled through it twice, and I know for a fact there is no oppression going on there, let alone forced labor, genocide, all of this stuff that they're talking about. I know this for a fact. These are lies. These are not mistakes. These are lies by the American government. And many people mistakenly perpetuate the lies. They're mistakes, but the lie is what started it. This is not true at all. So American government has created a lie which is then perpetuated by a lot of people who believe it to be true. They're not liars. They actually believe it to be true. There's the difference. Now, often I can get one of those people in front of me and say, but did you know about this or this or this? And they go, wow, I didn't know about that. So I have been there. I have seen it. Now, they need to go and see it for themselves before they believe it. But the fact is, this is based on an entire lie. So that's why Fernando suggested, let's put everything into a box that says made in Xinjiang, put them all onto ships, send them across, and I say, let's just stop sending medicines. That's our two solutions to fixing this problem. And America would just say, we can't take this. And then what do you think is going to happen? America has the largest collection of guns in private hands in the world. America has the largest number of drug users, both legal and illegal, in the world. And when those drug users can't get their drugs, what are they going to do?
Yeah,
they're going to get their guns. They need their drugs, so they're going to get their guns to go and demand them from the pharmacy, and the pharmacy is going to close down, and there'll be no pharmacies left, so then they're off to Walmarts or wherever it is that they can get whatever they can get. America will descend into chaos, and it won't be like a civil war, North versus South. It will be haves versus the have-nots. And China could do that tomorrow if it chose to. It really could.
So does that mean... please continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Could you repeat that because you broke up?
No, I was just saying, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue what you were saying.
No, you're breaking up on my end. I'm sorry.
Hold on 1 second. No, I was saying I didn't mean to interrupt you. Could you please continue with what you were saying?
Oh, sorry. No, I'm finished. I'm basically saying that China could do a lot of things, but never does. It chooses the path of least resistance, and it chooses the Sun Tzu's art of war method of you win the battle by not taking part in it. You walk away from the battle and let them fight amongst themselves, which is what America is currently doing. I don't know how they will react if Venezuelan ships or ships coming out of Venezuela have a Chinese flag on them. That's an entirely different story. That would be very serious. But so far, no Chinese flagged ship as far as I'm aware. But there may have been, the understanding I have is that there's a Chinese-bound cargo has been seized. Now, if that's true, the company that owns that cargo, if it's a state-owned enterprise, then they've done this to China's government. If it's not a state-owned enterprise, they've done it to private industry, and China will make the appropriate diplomatic noises about it, and it will silently, in the back rooms, consider what's our next step. And that next step will be something that hurts America. Whatever that is, I don't know.
Doesn't mean that Xi Jinping is playing this wrong. I mean, the U.S. continuously does stuff like this. And then there's a de-escalation after the U.S. does something like this and China responds to it. Yeah. It seems that the U.S. believes that it can get away with this type of behavior, even with a country as powerful as China. Should they be more aggressive in, let's say, maybe not necessarily dump all the treasuries or stop all the drugs, but at the very least make it very clear that this behavior is unacceptable and won't be tolerated, even if it's not in direct military means, even if it's in these indirect terms, because the U.S. doesn't seem to be taking them seriously.
Yeah, you've just nailed one of the things about Chinese people. People say you can't criticize the government here, and the only criticism that I hear of Xi Jinping, and this is regular, is that he's too soft. He's not hard enough. He should take back Taiwan. He should challenge the Americans. He shouldn't let Donald Trump meet him, and he shouldn't allow his senior government officials to go to America. He should really stand his ground. That's the only criticism. Now, the only thing I'd say about that is he's a much smarter man than I am, and he's very, very well advised. He has some people inside of his inner circle. The most famous of them is a guy called Wang Hunin. Wang Hunin spent many years in America. He wrote a book called America versus America, or something, America Against America, where he basically forecast everything that's happening today 30 years ago. So when you look at how 30 years ago, or a little less than 30 years ago, the Gordon Changs and those people were reporting how China was going to be collapsing, well, they got it wrong, but Wang Hunin has got it exactly right. I mean, basically, if you read his book, which I have, you can see the Black Lives Matter. You could see the riots. Even in the 1980s, he was well aware of what was going on in the Watts riots, the Los Angeles riots from many, many years ago. He was recording and documenting this and traveling around America, talking to think tanks. You know, he was a recently graduated scholar, and now, for the last 4 presidents of China, he's been in their Politburo. He's one of the longest, I think maybe the longest serving member. And I'll be sorry to see him go, but I think he's about 68 or 69 years old now. So he's ready to retire. But he is possibly the wisest head on how to deal with American belligerents. And he's advising Xi Jinping. Before Xi Jinping, he advised Hu Jintao. Before that, he advised Jiang Zemin. So he's been there about these changes. So I think the criticism that we might have of Xi Jinping for being weak, for allowing this, what's the best thing to do when your enemy has made a mistake? And I think he's adopted that philosophy. Another person, Ina Tengen, who I respect enormously, said once to me, he said, when someone is running towards a cliff, you don't pat him on the back because he's going over the cliff anyway. That's how I think China is viewing this. There is nothing we can do. Whatever they do will only escalate America's reaction. So a tiny action from China would create a bigger reaction. So why not just let the cliff come? They're running towards it at a rapid rate. And that's how I think most people in China who aren't criticizing Xi Jinping are viewing this. Why is America so stupid? Why are Americans doing these stupid things? Aren't they smart enough? They're the smartest country in the world. This is how Chinese people talk to me. What do you know about America and why they're doing this? I say, I'm not American.
One of the other subjects I want to hit you with, you preempted it a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Is Japan getting a nuclear weapon a red line for China?
I'd say so, yes. There have been probably in excess of 100 informal apologies for what Japan did during the Second World War. Many of them from low-ranking soldiers, some of them from senior officers, one even from a prime minister, but there has never been a formal country-to-country apology. And that is what makes China so angry, because all they want is for Japan to recognize that they did very evil things and say, we won't do that again. Now, what's unfortunately happening right now is that as a result of Takaichi's comments a little while ago, her popularity has soared. Now, what does that mean? Yes. What does that mean when you're looking at Japan, a country that has been... Now, a few years ago, maybe 25 years ago, Japan, maybe 30 years ago, Japan had the GDP of almost the entire continent of Asia. Japan, one small country, had a similar GDP to the entire continent of Asia. Now, China has provinces and cities with the GDP of Japan. So you've got this situation where the tide has completely turned. And Japanese people are angry. Understandably, they were. I remember living in Australia in the 1980s and 1990s, and we were inundated with Japanese tourists. Now, that wasn't a bad thing because they were bringing lots and lots of money, but in some respects, it caused for me living in Brisbane, and every time I went to the Gold Coast, there were shops I couldn't even go in because they only served Japanese customers. And I felt that was a bit off. Well, now the same thing is applying to Chinese customers, which is also a bit off. But the Japanese had some resentment back then. But that was how rich they were. They came across for long weekends to play golf. And I didn't play golf, but a few friends of mine who did said, I can't afford to play golf anymore because the prices have just gone up so high because it's full of Japanese business people. They come down and play golf. They owned half the golf courses in Queensland. They were just flying down. It's like a 9-hour flight. They come down on a Friday and go home on a Monday and play golf for 2 days. They go to the Gold Coast mostly, but also Cairns and Townsville, which are a bit nearer to Japan. They're like 3 hours flight north of Brisbane. So they were doing this then. They were a really, really rich, comfortable country, and now they're going through recession. They've got huge debts. They've got unemployment problems. They've got demographic problems. And what's happened is exactly the same as during the period between the First and Second World War. Germany went through all of this, and it created a resurgence which came Nazism. The National Socialist government, they elected Adolf Hitler. He did a fantastic job of rebuilding the country, rebuilding the economy, rebuilding the military, and then went. So you can see why China, looking at history, is saying, we do not want this situation to exist. There is a China. The United Nations has it. The Japanese constitution has it, and it says they will never do this. They will never have weapons. But now it looks like not only are they asking for them, but a very large proportion of their population is saying, yes, we want them. We're going to get them. And that is the most worrying aspect of all to millions and millions of Chinese people, because they remember. I mean, there's a lot of negativity about this at the moment. You know, why won't Chinese just get on with the rest of their lives and forget it? Well, they can't forget it because there hasn't been a formal apology. And that formal apology, country to country level, will be enough. Like the Germans did to the Jewish population, we will never do this again. We acknowledge this was bad. And that's what Japan needs to do. So just one prime minister who says it when he's finished his office, or a former soldier who used to behead people for fun during the occupation of China, these guys, they've come back and they have apologized. So Chinese people don't have a problem with Japanese people. But China has a problem with Japan because of that. And I see that as a huge, huge turning point. Until the day that Japan says, we did do that, and we're sorry, and we're going to put it into our school books, and we're going to teach it in our history lessons so that it never happens again. Because what they're doing now is whitewashing it. Did you know that Japan invaded Pearl Harbor and China and Singapore and Malaysia and Burma and Thailand? Do you know they invaded all of them in order to free Asians from Western imperialism? That's what they're teaching. And now they're saying the biggest problem was they lost. And you can see tweets like this, and they're getting like 5 million views and 100,000 likes. Now, this is the worrying thing, because it's not a simple case of, they're talking about this. There is a resurgence of a very horrible situation, which did happen 75, 80 years ago, and no one in the world wants this to happen again. And it's not gonna go away until Japan says, yes, we did do that. Here's the history books, and this is what we did, and we'll never do it again. Until such time as they do that, many Chinese people believe that they've just whitewashed it, and they are very, very in fear of Japan doing it again. If I was Australia, I'd be more worried about Japan than I'm worried about China. Much more worried. If I am Australian, but if I was Australia, the country, and Australia's government came to me for advice, I'd say, watch out for Japan. Until such time as they recognize their history, they will repeat it. Or they might.
That is obviously the concern with China, that Japan is effectively going in a bad direction, with the large part of the population agreeing with that bad, with a certain historical context.
Her popularity rating, just a survey, popularity survey, went up to 85%. So when you get a government with 85% popularity, that's pretty serious. That's a good government in theory. China has 90%. But China's not threatening to go to war with anyone, and never has. It has a 90% the government has a 90% approval rating. And this is not from me. This is Harvard University. This is the Edelman Trust Barometer. This is Berkeley, California University. These are serious academic institutions that have researched this, and they say this. I don't say this. I just cite the people who do say it. But I happen to know, when I walk out in the streets and I'm talking to people in China, that the people I know in China and the people I meet in China are, generally speaking, happy with their government and the way the government treats them. That's a generality, but the fact is it's borne out by academic studies. So when you've got an 85% survey that says she's a popular leader, and she's saying she wants to rearm, remilitarize, and add nukes to the equation, then you should start worrying.
Wow. That is disconcerting. Yeah. And this is where we get into the whole red line stuff, that this is not going to be allowed to happen.
There's another aspect to this which a lot of people don't realize. Do you know who Japan's closest neighbor is?
Yeah, I would imagine it's going, I'm trying to think of it on the map. So you have Japan. Above Japan, you have South Korea, if I'm not mistaken. Or am I wrong on this?
1 kilometer from the northernmost island of Japan is the southernmost island of eastern Russia. Russia is Japan's nearest neighbor. So when Japan talks about remilitarizing, Russia starts to worry, as much as China worries, as much as South Korea worries, as much as North Korea will be worried about it too. North Korea won't give a shit. They'll just bomb them anyway, by the sounds of things. So I think maybe they'll take the pressure off all of us. But that's the humorous side of it. It's quite serious. But I do believe North Korea wouldn't have any of the qualms that China has or any other country has. They'll just say, well, if you're going to threaten us, bang. So Russia is the closest neighbor to Japan. And a lot of people don't realize that. The southernmost island of the east of Russia, if you go all the way across Russia, it ends up in China, around the Heilongjiang area. And the southernmost island off the tip of that end of Russia is only either 1 kilometer or 1 mile away from the northernmost island of the Japanese, what do you call that? It's not a peninsula, it's not an isthmus, I can't remember what you call it. But the archipelago of Japan.
Well, Russia has already made a point of saying this is outlandish, that this can't happen.
And that's
Obviously,
why.
both of these countries were victors in the Second World War and had to beat back Nazism and the fanaticism of Japan. So you can imagine they have some feelings about it. Do
A
you
lot
think
of
this is
people
being
don't realize, sorry, one more thing to add to that. A lot of people don't realize this. Russia and Japan were at war before China
before the
and
war?
Japan were at
That's
war.
right.
But they were at war in China. The British named Port Arthur was taken by the Japanese from the Russians, and as a result of the war that took place then, or the battles that took place then, the Treaty of Shimonoseki was signed in the city of Shimonoseki by the Americans, giving Japan the rights to Taiwan Island. This is how Japan got Taiwan, from defeating Russia in China. No wonder China's got a defensive military. So many people don't know this history that you look at this and go, wow, now I understand. Why does China hate this? Why does Russia hate the Japanese? This is the reason why. It's been going on for hundreds of years, but certainly in the last 150 years, Russia, Japan, China, and many other countries have all had wars over Chinese territory in China.
Do you think the U.S. is pushing this? I mean, part of the plan of retrenchment and pushing "quote unquote" allies out to effectively, let's say, share the burden of world primacy. That this is Japan kind of taking up this mantle in
Yeah,
this region of the globe.
you broke up towards the end of that conversation, that question. But yes, I do believe that the Americans are doing this quite deliberately. It's divisive tactics. So they want to divide the allies they want to combine their allies and divide their enemy. They're currently working very hard to militarize Australia. Now, Australia and Guam are going the bases for the long-range strikes into wherever the war happens to be, whether that be Russia, Japan, or whether that be China, Japan, China, Russia, Japan. I don't know how it's going to work, but that's their thought process. Guam is a great military base for them. It's right there in the middle of the South Pacific, or the Pacific, and it's far enough away that if a bomb hits that, it doesn't kill many Americans. It will kill a lot more local people than the Americans who work on that base. So they're trying to militarize all of these different areas, and then they want those areas. They're currently getting Japan and Australia to work in tandem militarily. So they're acting on activities together. They're doing exercises, military exercises together. So yeah, I think they're basically outsourcing. Subcontracting is the word I like to use. Their military, their future military, in the same way that they subcontracted this to Ukraine. We want to delay the Russians. We want to stall their economy. We want to make them weaker militarily. And the best way we can do that is to get NATO, of which we are the major component, we'll get NATO to pay for it. And now they've backed off. And they're saying to Europe, it's up to you, Europe. This is not our war. Marco Rubio actually said that. Well, that's not our war. It's on a different continent. As if Venezuela wasn't a different continent, but it's our hemisphere now. So they just pick and choose. The hypocrisy is unreal. But that's not our war because it's on a different continent. Although we put the puppet government in, we made it happen. We created NATO so that this could be done. We expanded NATO all the way around, and now it's Europeans' war. So you get on with it. So they're basically subcontracting. Now, what I hope happens is Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, Australia, even Guam and the other islands in the South Pacific, who are all being militarized. There was a great thing the other day. China took a 70-year-old airstrip on an island somewhere in the South Pacific, and they renovated it so the 800 occupants of that island could use light planes to get to and from other islands. Now China could militarize that island. What? We're talking about an airstrip that belonged to World War II and is no bigger than the size of the freeway outside my house. It's not an airstrip at all. It's a road. It's a concrete road. China has rebuilt it, resurfaced it, and now people can fly in and out of that island, and it will boost tourism to that island because you can fly into wherever the nearest airport is, Fiji, Nauru, where I don't know. But you can fly in there, and then you can take an island hopper and get to this island. And that's going to boost the economy for the 800 people who live there. But of course, America is really angry about this, and they say it could be used for China's military. No, it couldn't. China's military, the only thing that's got a long enough range to reach there, couldn't possibly land on this. But that's logic. Logic doesn't apply in this. So this is what they're doing. They have militarized the South Pacific. They've militarized the Central Pacific. They're militarizing Australia. They're militarizing Southeast Asia. The Thailand-Burma thing is also them militarizing. And it's all going on because America wants to encircle China, put a ring around China. They want Mongolia as well. They want Kazakhstan. They want Uzbekistan. They're working on Pakistan at the moment. These are all, China is bordered by 17 countries in that region. And this is where China, if it is ever blockaded by sea, will be shipping all of its containers by train across to Europe, Eurasia, and the rest of the world, basically. So pretty much anything can get out of China by train. It's faster, but of course a train can only take 50 or 60 or maybe 100 containers, whereas a ship can take 10,000 containers.
Right.
I don't know what the numbers are, but a lot.
I got to be honest, why does China even care what the U.S. thinks or what they say? I mean, we have, 800, 900 military bases around the world. Mm-hmm. As you pointed out, the U.S. is effectively militarily surrounding China and doing their damnedest to do so. And the National Defense Authorization Act had just passed. It was the largest budget to Taiwan, from my understanding, that has ever gone to Taiwan. So there's this province that's part of China that the United States is effectively militarizing and sending a huge amount of money to militarize. And the U.S. is complaining about China.
Did you ask why does China care?
Yes.
That island
basically,
belongs to China. The people of that island are Chinese. Now, they
No. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, why? No, go ahead. I was going to say that's not where I was going with it. I was asking in the sense of
the people of Taiwan may not agree with the Communist Party, but they are Chinese. Your turn.
No, I accept that. What I mean is, why does it's almost like if somebody is they're complaining, and yet they're radical hypocrites. I'm going to care less about their complaints. So it's like, okay, you're militarily surrounding me. You have weapon systems in all of these countries. You're trying to make deals with these countries in order to block me out in regards to trade. And you've been putting money and weapons into a province of China for people that are Chinese. And you are complaining that we have an airstrip that is not even a military base. I'm asking why does China care? Not in the sense of why do they care about the Taiwanese? I'm asking why do they care about America's
in that respect, China doesn't care. China doesn't care what America says. China is very concerned about what America does. And that's a very different story. Now, what America actually does to China is very little. America comes to China because it knows. Now, if we go back to 2008, China helped America out enormously by buying its U.S. Treasury debts, and it went up to $1.3 trillion. Now it's $800 billion. Still a lot of money. But they've divested themselves of that so they could buy more gold, and that gold is going in to support Enbridge, which is a currency, digital currency that BRICS are using, and China, or the Bank of China, People's Bank of China supports, but it's based in Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, and somewhere in the Middle East, UAE, I think, but not certain on that. So anyway, China doesn't really care what America says. It absolutely cares what America does. And America comes begging with cap in hand. And we've seen this in the last two administrations where America comes along and says, everything is good, everything's constructive. And then they go away and then they do something very different. And Macron did the same thing for Europe. He came across and he had a great meeting with Xi Jinping. They did stuff together, lots of photo opportunities. And then he went back and said, China's got to stop doing this, stop doing that, and turned it around. So it's really not about what they say, because what they say means nothing. What they do means everything. And what America does will dictate how China reacts. Now, the next thing that I perceive happening is going to be Scott Bessent complaining because China did not buy 12 million tons of
I thought it was
soybeans.
wheat. Oh,
And they
soybeans. I
never
thought it was
said,
wheat for some reason.
no, soybeans. But they
Soybeans.
never said that. Wheat was a few years ago. It was in the last Trump administration.
Okay.
But what happened was they came away from this meeting and said China has agreed to buy 12 million tons, 120 million tons, 12 million tons this year and 15 million tons next year, and for the next 3 years, 15 million tons a year. Now, okay, that's a lot of soybeans, but China has already got a stockpile of soybeans because during this upset period where they weren't trading with each other, China bought soybeans from Argentina, from Brazil, from Australia, from a few other places, and it's now got all the soybeans it needs. And then it bought like $300,000 worth of soybeans. That's probably one shipload of soybeans came from America to China. So they haven't. So now the soybean farmers are going to go to Scott Bessent and say, you told us, and he's going to say China lied. The next thing is China did not, unequivocally, did not say that they would relax restrictions on rare earth elements. They said they would relax restrictions that they imposed on October the 7th for 12 months.
Right.
But all the previous restrictions, which are the real ones on rare earth elements, have never been restricted, have never been changed. They aren't being lifted. So the next thing is when these weapons manufacturers and car dealers and stuff say, well, we're supposed to be getting rare earth elements to make our shit. China's going to say, well, no, we told you have to apply and you have to prove that it's for peaceful purposes, and then we'll sell it to you. Until you do that, we're not selling it. It's registered now. It's controlled. So you need to be a registered buyer, a registered user, and you need to be producing products that we can see before we sell you more. That's the way it works. They now have a whole office in Beijing dedicated to this, and every single port has people trained in how to prevent rare earth elements getting out of the country without proper paperwork. So that's the way China has changed. And they've done all of that. They've been doing it since 2015, but they've done most of this in the last 12 to 18 months. And then Scott Bessent came out of a meeting in early December or late November saying, oh, they've decided that they're going to hold off on doing this for 12 months. They haven't. So rare earth elements are not going to be shipped unless they are approved, registered, licensed, and shipped to an authorized buyer until those processes have been taking place. So Scott Bessent is going to start lying now to the East American public and saying China's reneged on the deal that they made when we sat down and talked to them in Malaysia, and reneged on the deal that they made when they shook hands in Busan in South Korea. So China has never made these deals. Scott Bessent announced that they had. China never did. So China's just going to say, well, you're wrong. You made a mistake there. But they know it's lies. It's not a mistake. So no, I think China is going to just handle this in the way that it always does, peacefully, calmly, rationally. And then when faced with decisions, they will make decisions that actually hurt America, as opposed to hurting the rest of the world.
Jerry, fantastic breakdown. Always great breakdown, and I always appreciate you for giving this breakdown. Jerry Gray, he is host of Jerry's Take on China. He has lived there for more than 20 years, has traveled more than 40,000 kilometers by bike across the country. And I think it's more than 30 years at this point.
No, it's 21 years I've lived here.
Okay, so it is 21 years. But it's more than 40,000 kilometers by bike.
About 40,000 kilometers on bikes around China. So I'm getting to know the place. I'm planning my next ride we're going to fly up to Hohhot in Inner Mongolia and ride across central China back to Guangdong.
Are you?
We rode to Mongolia just 6 months ago, finished in June. We're going to do a different route through we went in a straight line, kind of up through the center. We're going to come back via the western through Ningxia, Gansu, Qinghai, and then into Sichuan, which is kind of central China, and then back down. So it'll be like a 6 or 8 week journey. That's the next one.
Oh, you're going to be on a bicycle for 6 to 8 weeks.
So it's what I do for fun.
Wow. Just wow. I am not doing enough with my life when I hear stuff like that. But Jerry, man, thank you for this. You have a good night, okay?
Thank you very much, and thank you once again to your audience. Some good points coming up. I can see them. Thank you. And good night.
Absolutely. Be safe.
Oh, and Merry Christmas.
And thank you. Merry Christmas back at you. I know, like you said, you guys celebrated winter solstice, but still, I still offer Merry Christmas to whoever.
Cheers.
Like I said, I like
Okay.
the holidays. Be safe, man. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Shout out the jury. Shout out the jury. Always gives a great breakdown of what is taking place. Calm, rational, explains it extraordinarily well, and explains it extraordinarily well for a Western audience. So shout out to him. Happy Indigenous holidays. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever you want to go with. All of those things are perfectly fine. Let's go to chat for a bit. Dimitri Lascaris is going to be joining us in roughly 5 minutes. So let's go to chat before he gets here. And by the way, what do you guys want if donations are taken during a segment or towards the end of a segment, where the donations can directly ask the audience member a question, if indeed a question is there, as opposed to waiting to the end of the show? Let me know. If so, I'll be willing to do that. Basically, if you have a question that you want to ask the guests at the end of the segment, we'll go to the chats and we will see if the question is suitable for the guests. Yeah, put it that way, because some of you said some wild shit. But if that is one of those things that you guys like, if that is one of those things that would incentivize donations, let me know. That is something that I'm willing to do. But let's go to the chat. I don't celebrate Christmas, or I don't do Christmas myself. Thank you for your hard work in the past year. Well, thank you for that. Can you please advise where you are and what it's like there? Also, look after yourself. Laugh 66. Currently, I am in Baku, Azerbaijan. I am in Baku, Azerbaijan. I was having a conversation with Vanessa one day, Vanessa Bealey, and she said, she was talking about how Syria felt like her spiritual home. Baku feels like my spiritual home. I love it here. I love it here. I went out to the Christmas market on Saturday. Now, usually when I'm traveling, I don't get the opportunity to kind of travel because I'm usually working. But I made a point to get my ass out the house and go. I had a really great time at the Christmas market. But before I went to the Christmas market, I went to a chess club that was nearby. The woman owned the chess club. I was in love on the spot. Unfortunately, she's married. Her brother is the second strongest player on the planet. There's that. She has been in all sorts of competitions all across Europe, and for that matter, all across the United States. She has a FIDE rating of over 2,300. The first game, she kicked my ass. The second game was very close. The second game actually was a damn good game. I love it. Because what's wild about it, when you have a chess club that's that close, you can grow organically. It's not something that you need to push. It's just something that you automatically do. It's just part of your day, part of your life. And, sitting there playing a slow game brought back memories. And having somebody who's that strong, especially a female, that can kick your ass was very sexy. No, she was great. She was awesome. And her club is just great. You just walk in, they have a bar, they have all of these chessboards that are effectively just out waiting. They're going to have a blitz on Friday night that I'm definitely going to go to. So I'm looking forward to it. So no, this has been my favorite spot up to this point. Baku has been awesome. No complaints. No complaints. Love the place that I'm in, love the area that I'm in, love the chess club, and I even like the clinic. So I'm currently in Baku. So far, so good. The only downside to here is that the visa only lasts for 1 month. It's just 1 month. It's like you find your favorite place and you can only stay there for a month. But otherwise, it's nice. Jacqueline, super sticker. Thank you for that, Jacqueline. You have my appreciation. And Frank Friel, Merry Christmas, Jamal. Once again, I appreciate all your hard work. Don't stop pissing off your guests. Just kidding. Yeah. That seems like it's very difficult. Good food. So most of the food that I've gotten has been, I usually make my own groceries. So I haven't had the tendency to check the food yet. I've had like delivery. First place. Second place, better. So I want to go to Sichuan. I would love to go to China. I would love to go to China. You know, the thing is, for me, anytime the choke point for me in locations is always the clinic, because I have to have a clinic. I have to be able to get treatments. And at most, you can go for like 5 days, at least for me anyway, providing I am under strict control of my faculties. Recently, I have not been under strict control of my faculties, so that ability to go for that many days, not so much. But anywhere you go, you have to find a clinic first. So that's always a choke point. But I would love to go to China. I would love it. I would love to go to China. I would love to visit Russia. It's weird working for Sputnik and not visiting Russia. That just feels strange. But no, so far so good. I got to be honest. Being near a chess club, I was so excited. I was so excited. You have no idea. Like, I was over the moon excited. Especially, look, I rarely lose at chess. Blitz is different because you're playing so many games at Blitz. You're playing like, you know, in one night you might play 100 games of Blitz just because it's 3-minute games. And even though you're playing people who are very strong, so my rating, I think, is like 2150 in Blitz, 2200 as a master. So that gives you this idea of strength. Slow chess is different. It's just different. And when I used to be able to sit at the board for 6 hours a day, I just don't have that in me as I became older, where you just sit there and you can play a game for 6 hours and you concentrate the entire way through and you maintain your focus all the way through. Oh, that's hard. That's hard. When you stop doing that, that muscle withers away. Blitz is different though. Blitz is a lot of feel, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to it though. It was very nice to be able to go and sit there and play somebody of strength, especially when I go in, I assume I'm going to win because I'm a very strong player. Even my residual strength is strong in comparison to most people. But she turns to me in the middle of the game. This is some European shit. Americans would never say some shit like this. With all the sincerity in the world, you're not a bad player, but with a bit of practice, you can be better. It's like, fuck you, man. Fuck you, man. Yes, you're being honest in your assessment, but it's an assessment of somebody who it's like she acknowledges her strength, which I love, right? It's this acknowledgement of power and this acknowledgement of power differential. And again, she wasn't being a dick about it, with all the sincerity in the world, with all the kindness that a woman can muster. You're not a bad player. Thank you for that. But effectively, you're going to lose this game. And if you practice, you'll be stronger. No, man, it was good. It was good. So far, I've liked it here. I've liked it here. If you can save money and go on a trip, that's a win-win, especially if you can find a chess club nearby. So, but I see my man in the background. Dimitri Lascaris. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Good, Jamal. You look, you're like it's some exotic location there, my man. Where are you
this is the kitchen, believe it or not. This is their kitchen. My mom was like, somebody was on acid when they did this kitchen. I love it. I love it. They have like all of these Post-it notes all across the kitchen, like with Futuramas, I Want to Believe. Like they have like music bands, all of that. It's the kitchen.
Yeah, it looks like a wonderful place to cook.
Yeah, it's very lively. It is very lively. I wish I could take a camera and just show around the room. No, it's very exotic. I love it. I love it. If it's my tenor, very nice. And then it's very nice.
Just let me apologize to Dilton for being a bit late today. I suddenly got held up by something at the last minute. But
no, you're perfectly fine. I was telling the audience that I found the chess club nearby, and the woman that runs it is like has her brother is the second strongest in the world. And so wow. I was over the moon. I was over the moon. I also found that there's a YouTube chess tournament that takes place every year. What is called POG, something that YouTubers play each other. Now, I've said for the longest time, I would love for there to be a YouTube chess tournament, and lo and behold, there is. So Next
You live,
year.
you live in DC, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you. Is that where you're at?
That's more complicated. I'm homeless right now. I mean, I lived in DC for the last 5 years, and but I was only there for the job, so it wasn't like I had connections to DC. I lived in Richmond, Virginia, most of my life. So I would say I live in Richmond if I had to put a place down, but I don't have a place per se.
The reason I ask is that when I lived in New York, I used to live in the West Village, and I loved going down to Greenwich. The park, playing chess in the open air. That was great. Do you have anything like that in your community where you can go out and play?
I know there's a park in DC that apparently people play at, but I enjoyed going to New York. I mean, also in that park. I got, oh God, man, I have so many stories about that. Because in one case, the guy, people try to make money when they're in the park. And so they gamble when they play. I'm perfectly fine gambling and playing chess, right? And after the guy realized, okay, I'm not going to be able to win these games and make money, he just like, all right, I need to move on to my next mark. Then there was another guy who apparently had like YouTube videos made about him because he talked so much shit when he played. And he got crushed. And he was sitting there like I'm this world famous guy and all of this other stuff, this big personality. No, man, New York chess spot is just phenomenal.
I've never met a trash talking chess player.
Seriously? Dude, my barbershop. I grew up in a barbershop playing chess. And the shit that they would talk was withering. I left that barbershop in tears at times because I was a kid, right? When I first started at the shop. And, you're like 13 years old. You have a grown man just going in, talking shit to you as he's kicking your ass. And you're like, I'm going to fuck him up when I get the chance. As I got older, by the time I was 16, I was dominant. They couldn't touch me. They were just shocked that somebody could play that well. But all of the anger that I built up as a kid from the shit that he used to talk to me. We used to talk so much shit. Even in tournaments, people, like when people are in Skittles rooms and stuff like that, the shit that it's great. It's just a great part of the game.
Hey, man, I hope we play one day. We could trash talk each other. That would be a blast.
You will lose.
I know I will. I'm sure you kick my ass.
Now, I brought you on because Netanyahu is apparently going to D.C., speaking of Washington, D.C. And what the headline is that he is going in order to try to convince Donald Trump to, I guess, resume strikes against Iran. Now, this is pretty wild, and it's problematic on a few points. You can't use weapons of mass destruction anymore because, according to Trump, all of those have been destroyed. So now it's, we want to strike their missile systems. I mean, this seems outlandish. What do you think the angle is here? I mean, obviously, Israel got crushed in that 12-day war. And even if they don't think they got crushed, or even if they think they won that war, Israel got the beating of its life, of the existence of that country in that 12 days, and was completely incapable of maintaining its military effectiveness over the course of the 12 days because it was begging the United States to end the war. What do you think this is about currently? I mean, do you think what is the thought? That the U.S. will get involved in those strikes? Because you would require the U.S. to get involved in any of these strikes.
Well, I have perhaps an unusual take on this breaking news. So my understanding is that this story originated with NBC. And I've read the NBC article a couple of times. And of course, it is based upon, apparently government sources who were not authorized to speak publicly. So you don't know who they are. And my operating assumption, Jamal, when I see articles like this, is that I think most people don't assume this, but I think the most rational assumption is what has happened is that the Israeli government and or the U.S. government, perhaps both, have directed, not just allowed, but directed some officials to go to some hand-picked media organization, in this case, NBC News, and plant a story. And what their reason for planting the story is quite important, but the story itself may or may not be true, and oftentimes it's just a bunch of bunk. So if you read this story carefully,
yes,
it doesn't really tell you anything new. I mean, I can't see anything new in there. We all knew that Israel was, salivating at the prospect of attacking Iran again. those of us who have, a functioning brain knew that. And we also knew that Israel would definitely want the United States to come in because of the ass kicking it suffered the last time around when it went directly forward. So I don't doubt that Trump and Netanyahu are going to talk about Iran, but I think they probably talk about Iran every time they get together. And I think that Netanyahu has been trying for decades to drag the United States into a war with Iran. So this isn't news. What I think this is a cover story. They have to tell, how many times has Netanyahu met with Trump already this year? He's probably met with him more than any other leader in the world by a wide margin. He's going back to Florida again for another meeting with Trump. Naturally, people are going to say, what are they going to talk about? So they got to give him a story. So they give him this story, which isn't actually enlightening at all. It's par for the course. So I ask, what are they likely to talk about that they don't want you to know they're talking about? And I think what they're probably going to be talking about is the Charlie Kirk scandal. The fact that, there is a growing suspicion amongst many people in the Republican base that Israel might have had a hand in the murder of Charlie Kirk. And they're going to be talking about the release of the Epstein files.
Really?
Serious implication. I would be shocked, absolutely flabbergasted if they don't talk about those two things. And they're sure as hell not going to want you to know that they're talking about them. I mean, do you really think that, with Epstein and the idea that Epstein was an agent of Israel while he was masterminding the abuse of 1,200 girls? This is a matter of state. It's of existential importance to Israel. And Donald Trump just violated a law, which he was forced to sign by Congress, that required the full disclosure of the Epstein files by December 19th. He just flagrantly violated it. Israel's sweating bullets about this. I have no doubt about that. And it's sweating bullets about Candace Owens. That's why they're sending, Ben Shapiro out and Barry Weiss, everybody, to sabotage Candace Owens' reputation. The main influencers of in the United States for Israel. So these things, I think, for sure will be on the agenda, and they have to give you a cover story. And I think this is probably what the cover story is. Now, can I prove all of this? No, I can't. I could be wrong, but I think that that's the most rational interpretation of the NBC story.
Oh, that is a good point. I mean, the Epstein thing is fascinating because obviously they released some documents, but most of those things were like heavily redacted. I think it was like 60-70% was redacted. And it's like, okay, you're keeping out names of pedophiles. You seem to be protecting pedophiles. And I think more important than just the people who were in the document, Donald Trump included, was, as you point out, the relationship between Epstein and Israel. He was an asset, if not some kind of agent in regards to, and his relationships were so extensive. Media, finance, business, political, etc. It's just astonishing. And you have to wonder, okay, what was the relationship? If this guy's an Israeli asset, what do these relationships garner? What do they give in this context? And what do these people get in the context of these relationships? You could be right, Dimitri.
Those questions, I'm sure, terrify the Israeli political elite. They should terrify. If they're not terrified by those questions, then they're even more stupid than I had imagined. So, but to go back to your question, Jamal, I do think that they will talk about Iran. I'm not saying that they won't talk about Iran, but I think they always talk about Iran. So what are they going to do? I mean, the question for me is Trump crazy enough to go to war with Venezuela and Iran at the same time? Because he seems to be all geared up for a war against Venezuela. And I imagine that although, Israel hates the Chavismo movement, always has, because Maduro and before him, Chavez, were such passionate critics of Israel. I have no doubt they'd love to see Machado come to power, who adores Israel. But I don't know if Trump is crazy enough to take on both of these headaches at the same time. Either one of them would be a gargantuan challenge for the U.S. military in its current state. So. Yeah,
I mean, agreed. This would be insane. But people thought it was going to be insane for the first attack. And I think for me, it was like, it may be insane, but it looks like they're gearing up for it. But in this case, I don't see the gear up. It just seems like a lot of talk coming out of this. From the Epstein thing, what do you think the consequences are going to be if indeed they're able to attach, they're able to make it clear without a shadow of a doubt, meaning if these redacted documents get released, and it is clear as day that Epstein, let me rephrase that. It is already clear as day that Epstein was an Israeli asset. That is known, that is understood. I guess the interesting thing would be the connections that Epstein had, like who these people are, what these people were doing. What do you think happens if that information comes out? Do you think anything happens just from the level of Zionists that are in the US government that are going to do everything in their power to protect Israel? Or do you think there is no way to stop this? This will be atomic in its scale.
I think hatred of pedophilia is bipartisan. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. People are horrified by this kind of depravity all across the political spectrum, with the possible exception of the most ardent Zionists themselves. But in any case, this is going to do irreparable harm to Israel's standing amongst Republicans. It is doing irreparable harm. It already is doing irreparable harm. You probably saw some of the speeches at the America Fest.
Tucker Carlson.
It wasn't just Tucker, it was Steve Bannon, man. You know, wow. Steve Bannon took a sledgehammer to Ben Shapiro. Yeah. And you could hear a pin drop in that audience when he was going after Ben Shapiro, right? People were like flabbergasted that it was just openly trashing the man with complete justification. So Israel's in serious trouble reputationally amongst the MAGA base. And this could spread like a cancer throughout the Republican Party base. And if they lose support of the Republican Party base, it's all over, man. It's just a matter of time. Like there is, like we've talked about this many times, Jamal. In my opinion, the reason why elites invest so much money, like buying Paramount and CBS and TikTok and so forth, to manipulate public opinion, is because they know they're outnumbered. They don't want the masses gathering together in unison against them. And there's only a certain margin of maneuver for the political elites when it comes to public opinion. They can depart from it to a certain degree and for a certain period of time. But when there's enough unity in opposition to a government policy, they have no alternative but to change course. And they will have to do that in the case of Israel on the current trajectory of public opinion in the United States. It's just a matter of time. And Israel knows this. This is why Israel is trying so hard to, eviscerate the civil liberties of Palestinian solidarity supporters, because they know if they lose the public relations war, it's over for Israel.
Yeah, I think Lindsey Graham said something like that, like Israel is losing the PR war. And it's like, well, dude, you murdered hundreds of thousands of people, most of which were children. How do you win that war? Like, how do you win the public relations war after something like that? You don't. Hopefully you don't, right? Yeah. I am fascinated by this idea that there's a split in the Republican Party on this issue. Obviously, there's Tucker, Candace, as you point out, Steve Bannon, Dave Smith, the comedian, meaning there seems to be a lot more luminaries who are willing to point out, this is not America first, this is something else. And you guys have murdered hundreds of thousands of people, most of which are children. This is outrageous. You think that spreads? You think that doesn't go anywhere, that this effectively gets worse? And if the Epstein files are released, even to the degree that they're released now, that spread can't be stopped?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if we find out exactly what Ehud Barak was doing and why his right-hand man was hanging out for weeks at a time at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion in New York City, if we find out what they were up to and how this compromat was employed, the man had video cameras all over his dens of depravity, Epstein. Yeah. He's probably got incredible material on all of these powerful people. And if we find out, I think it probably is the case, that in some way this material was used to effectively blackmail leaders into doing what Israel wanted them to do. If that is confirmed by the evidence, then I just can't imagine that there's going to be any meaningful support left for Israel in either the Republican or the Democratic Party. They've largely lost the base of the Democratic Party already. Mm-hmm. They're in real trouble. I think that right now, I would not be surprised if this is the number one foreign policy priority of the Israeli government, is managing this public relations disaster. Epstein and now Charlie Kirk. This is, Charlie, if enough people, whether in fact it's true, and I'm not saying it is true that Israel had a hand in the murder of Charlie Kirk, I think it's possible. And there's some circumstantial evidence. They certainly had a motive, they had an opportunity, but they may have had nothing to do with it. What really matters for Israel is not whether they did or did not have something to do with it. It's what people in the Republican Party believe. And if enough people are convinced by, advocates like Candace Owens, that Israel likely had a hand in it, and they're highly suspicious about that, in and of itself would be devastating to Israel standing amongst Republicans. And I think that belief, that suspicion is growing. Every time Candace Owens does an episode, she seems to have a new revelation that raises even harder questions about, the deep state's role in this and Israel's role in all of this.
Yeah, the Charlie Kirk thing is fascinating to me. I mean, because for one, there seems to be certain unanswered questions around his murder. There's that. And when Candace Owens came out with this idea that, there was, let's say, a contradiction in the relationship between Charlie Kirk and these Israeli assets that were effectively trying to get him to continue on a certain trend on the whole subject of Israel. And her pointing out like that relationship had fallen apart, fundamentally fallen apart. Erica Kirk gets in, and who is one of the first people she brings on is Ben Shapiro, effectively bastardizing her husband's relationship with all of these goons that were backing Israeli policy. And so, her thing was Israel had him murdered. And it is also weird that Netanyahu immediately after the murder starts piping up with all of these tweets. It's like, dude, this shouldn't even apply to you. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Like, it's very strange. It's very strange.
Well, what's even stranger is these Egyptian planes, which Candace says, she can prove definitively frequently went to Israel. That is, Egyptian planes were following Erica and Charlie Kirk around for years, 4 years, approximately, a little bit less than that, constantly showing up at airports where they were. And now she has evidence, which she says is ironclad, that these planes frequently traveled to Israel. What? What's that all about? No one's offering an explanation. And all they're doing is just trashing, any suggestion that Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk were being followed by these aircraft. But there's, pretty compelling evidence that that's true.
I guess we'll see. I mean, we'll see if these files get redacted. But you may be right that the Iranian thing is a cover story because it's too humiliating to say, I need to talk about Epstein and pedophiles that were associated with the Israeli government, considering the guy was an asset. That doesn't really go down well, right? Like, that's not a headline that you want. Netanyahu here to talk about an apex pedophiles relationship with Israel and how to keep this information out the news. We'll see. Maybe. I mean, it depends on whether or not Trump is forced to abide by the law. And that is an open question. What do you think about this Venezuela thing? He is now interdicting ships that are coming into or out of Venezuela. This is outrageous. And again, I always make the point, there's no such thing as international law. And when I say that, I point to stuff exactly like this. This is obviously breaking international law.
It's also violating the U.S. Constitution because the United States is now at war with Venezuela. A military blockade is an act of war. And it's astonishing how thoroughly Congress has abdicated its duty under the Constitution to be the sole arbiter of whether the United States goes to war or not, just completely and utterly abdicated it. So it's not just international law, which has become toilet paper. It's the U.S. Constitution, which has become toilet paper too. If I were an American, I'd be absolutely outraged by this, whether or not you like the Venezuelan government. The United States, the presidency now has the power to commit the country to a devastating war without congressional approval. So at the end of the day, I think even if the United States doesn't, and by the way, Jamal, I would be surprised if the U.S. and Israel don't orchestrate some kind of attack against Iran in 2026. That would be quite surprising. I just can't believe that they're going to be able to restrain themselves. I don't know what form that attack will take. Maybe it'll be some kind of series of terrorist attacks within Iran orchestrated by or implemented by agents of Israel and the United States. I don't know. But I think that's likely to happen. Whether or not that happens, Venezuela is going to be a quagmire for the United States. The idea that the Venezuelan people are going to embrace the invasion of their own country, or the bombardment of their own. When has this ever happened?
Yeah.
When have the people ever risen up when, the West swoops in and starts destroying their communities, their homes, killing their children, and said, oh yeah, we're going to now put in power the guy you want to be in power, or the woman in this case you want to be in power. No, that doesn't happen. And it's not what one would expect, people, especially people who have pride in their country and love in their country and care about the sovereignty of their nation. It's not what one would expect them to do. So the United States is going to find itself in a real hot mess. And one thing you can bank on, I think, is that there's going to be a wave after wave if the United States really goes to war, a big time against Venezuela, of people fleeing the country, trying to come into the south of the United States, desperately trying to cross the Caribbean. So this is going to undercut a primary plank of Donald Trump's platform, which is to stop illegal immigration. And the people in the United States who support these types of neocon wars and also have a big problem with illegal immigration, I think, they need to sort of wake up and smell the coffee, man. I mean, how can you, on the one hand, condemn illegal immigration and say it's run amok, and on the other hand, support policies that are going to exacerbate illegal immigration?
I'm curious on something else before I let you go. Does the release of the Epstein files destroy Netanyahu in Israel also? Like, meaning, can his government in Israel survive? And I guess maybe this question is not necessarily fair because the relationship between Epstein and Israel proper doesn't necessarily directly affect Netanyahu, or does it?
I want to point out that Ehud Barak, if I'm not, yes, I'm just confirming this, he was the leader of the Labor Party, right, which is supposed to be the main left-wing party in Israel. There's no such thing as a left-wing party in Israel nowadays, but and he was much more closely tied to Epstein than Netanyahu. So this is really a problem for the entire Israeli political elite. I don't think it's something that is confined to Likud and its current leader. The entire Israeli political elite was in bed with Epstein, I would imagine. He was an asset in some manner, he was an asset of the Israeli intelligence. And I think there was a general consensus in the Israeli political elite that this was a good thing for Israel, that he was a very useful instrument. That's my guess. So I don't know, hard to predict, but Netanyahu has an uncanny ability. I mean, I think right now the polls indicate that he would actually win, the Likud would actually win more seats than any other party in Israel.
Wow. That says a lot. That says a lot. Has this hit Canada, by the way? I'm curious. We don't often get Canadian news like talking about here, but has this affected Canada in any degree?
When you say this, are you referring to the Epstein scandal?
Epstein files, yeah.
Well, I've been trying to acquire more information about the relationship of the Bronfman family to Jeffrey Epstein. The Bronfmans are an institution, shall we say, in Canada. In fact, one of the Bronfmans is the head fundraiser for the governing Liberal Party.
Okay.
So they have deep ties to the Liberals. And there is some indication that members of the Bronfman family had a relationship with Epstein, but there's very little information available. So if that does become, if more evidence emerges that there was a real relationship there, that could become a political problem for the Liberals.
Wow. Dimitri, you have my appreciation, man. Thank you for this. And Merry Christmas, by the way, before I let you go. And I don't know if I gave you your bio when you first came in. I think we just started talking. Dimitri Lascaris, he's a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He runs Reason to Resist, a damn good channel. When is your next video coming up, by the way, so the audience will know?
I'm going to be interviewing our good friend Laith Marouf in about an hour's time, and we'll publish that later today.
Badass. Dimitri, have Merry Christmas, and you have a good one, man. Thank you for this.
You too, brother. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. We have come to the end. We have come to the end. I will do a show tomorrow, 23rd, 24th, 25th, probably up to New Year's. I will take that week. I'm looking forward to taking that week. You may see me pop in, but it would just be me popping in, not necessarily doing the show. That depends on if there is news or something like that that is effectively bubbling up and happening, or I just can't keep myself away. Either one of those things may affect my disposition. Right here, what you're essentially saying, for all intents and purposes, it's true. It's mind. Come back. It's mind blowing. Thanks for being here. Then wait. What you are essentially saying, for all intents and purposes, is that it is mind blowing. Yes. Look, man. If you have to ask the question, why would they redact so much of the Epstein files? If there is nothing to see, why redact so much? And obviously the reason they're redacting so much is because they're hiding stuff. Like, they obviously don't want you to know various people's names or various relationships and those type of things. And I think it is already pretty dead set that Epstein was an Israeli asset. And so then the question becomes, an asset in what context? Like, what was he effectively doing? Was there a personal and a private life? Or were those things effectively the same thing? Meaning, was he just an apex pedophile who hooked up with all of these children, and he did that in his personal time? Or was it, no, he had cameras in his room for reasons, and those reasons was effectively to get blackmail information on various people that he would give girls to? That is mind-blowing. And if that is able to come out, that is devastating. Not just for the Israelis or the Israeli government, but for the US government that A, covered that up, knew about it, and did everything in their power in order to protect those pedophiles. That is mind-blowing. And then you add in the people who might have been involved in this all throughout the political, economic, media culture, who had all of these relationships with Epstein itself. And then it's like, how did Epstein float in circles where he's talking to all of these people across all of these spectrums of audience, or all of these spectrums of what's the word I'm looking for? Of society. I mean, you're talking about people who are dealing in finance, media, acting, political, etc. And he seemed to have relationships with people across all of these spectrums. Okay, if that's true, what were these relationships? And redacting this information doesn't make it go away, or doesn't make people say, oh, well, thank you for the information. It makes people say, what are you hiding? So yeah, it's just amazing. All right, I'm going to call this a day. I'm dragging the ass. I'm tired. And I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And of course, Merry Christmas. Have a good one all. Be safe.